This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Full swing in 2018. Hey, the NBA teams are doing it big. And, of course, the Baseline NBA podcast is rolling right alongside of them, man. So much stuff happening right now in the association. The game is getting better, and so is the podcast. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, my brother from another mother. We've been doing this thing 5+ years, rolling hard on the NBA squad. My man Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Yo, man, we had what we call the bomb-o-genesis. You know what I'm saying? Blast us up here, up north. I survived it. It was kind of chilly-willy. But, man, Steph Curry was lighting things up, making it hot once again, man. We warming it up right now in the NBA, brother.
Well, I'm glad the NBA was able to keep you warm, man, because I know the Northeast is not a game, not a joke. Even here in South Florida, it's a little bit brisker than it usually is for us, but nothing to what's going on up there in the Northeast with all that snow and, storms and all that nature. But as always, it's great to be here with you. Salute to all the fans of NBA Baseline. Amazing show on tap, man. We're discussing stuff on the court. We're discussing stuff off the court that's going to help you, outside of in your basketball games. Even if you're a rec league hooper, you can go into your community leagues and go out there and dominate with some great content from a new digital platform that the NBA just released, man. So it's going to be an amazing show.
Yeah, man, we got the kind of basketball show this week. It's just gonna be like, I just need basketball in my life. You know what I mean? Like, I just need it in my life. It's just gonna be just that tilt for this upcoming show, and so we're really, really fortunate. In a little bit, we have the executive director of the NBA's Coach Association, Dave Fogel, and the director of business operations for eCoach, Collier Mills. They're going to be on board in our segment of The Drop to talk about this innovative platform called eCoach. We'll get into that. These guys, they know it. They love talking about the game of basketball, and they're going to help us help you get to that point as well, too. And then in our segment of The Breakdown, hey, there's a team out there that needs a little bit of respect, and they're actually going out there and they're taking it this season. That's the Toronto Raptors. But are they for real? Our man Ryan Wohlstadt from the Toronto Sun, he's going to be hopping on board to help us break down what's going on with the Toronto Raptors and why they should be a team to reckon with this season. So much happening, so much going down, man. We really appreciate everybody, again, tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Hey, it's the first show of 2018, so we got to do it right. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We're available on all the major platforms. You know where we are. You know how we roll. So be sure to download any one of those. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Cali, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week, our focus is on the team that seems to not get love or enough focus on in the Eastern Conference. More importantly, really in the NBA. And our man Ryan Wohlstadt of the Toronto Sun, he follows this team. He really... It's almost in a way, as journalists, we always have to stay objective. But for him, it's like the stats and the numbers that he's been putting out there and the insight that he's been giving is almost like something that reminds us of the presidential campaigns that we just recently dealt with here, man. Like, there really needs to be some recognition for how well the Toronto Raptors have been playing this season. And our man Ryan Wohlstadt is on board with us here this week to help us break it down. Ryan, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Ryan, look, I've been a believer of the Toronto Raptors as far as talent goes. And Shaw has, proverbially had the man crush with Masai Ujiri since coming over from Denver. And we keep playing, we keep doing this song and dance with this Toronto Raptors team because we see it. Like, there's something about this team. But then when it gets to the playoffs, we're always throwing more chinks at the armor than we are in being the true believers of what these guys are capable of doing. Why is it so difficult for people in the NBA community, listeners, fans alike, to buy into what the Toronto Raptors have been giving us over the last couple of seasons, and specifically even for this year, that we should buy into the hype of the Toronto Raptors?
Well, I think first it's history. They've seen them collapse in the playoffs year after year. The first year against Brooklyn, no one expected them to be good, and that Brooklyn had the veterans, and they were supposed to lose. They could have won in Game 7, but they ended up losing. And I mean, that like sort of Kyle Lowry got blocked by Paul Pierce, and that was the start of it. And people were like, "Well, we were wondering," but they were saying, "Well, that's a young team. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt." Then the next year, they get just crushed, swept by the Wizards, and that's really when everyone started to really be doubting. Well, okay, maybe these guys aren't as good as we thought. But then they come back and they make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. But the way they did it didn't really thrill people. I know Zach Lowe said it was kind of like the worst run to a conference finals ever, like least impressive, just because the games they were losing, they were getting blown out, and they were just barely winning the other games. I mean, they had some good moments, but the main reason was DeRozan and Lowry, for the most part, have been half the players they are in the regular season. In the regular season, they're great all-stars, all NBA caliber players, and in the playoffs, not always, but for a big chunk of it, they've just really struggled, especially with their shooting. And so I think that's why they have the doubters. And then last year they barely got by Milwaukee and were actually down in that series before they rallied. And even though they had home court, and then it was no contest against Cleveland. It was less of a contest than the previous year, and that was just in round 2. So I think that's where all the doubt stems from. But the reasons for optimism this year, I think, is they've revamped the offense and they've changed the game and balanced it out and taken a lot of the pressure off of DeRozan and Lowry, and it seems to have made everybody better, especially DeRozan and the whole team. And it just projects that this will be a tougher team to deal with in the playoffs than it has been in the past.
The questions about their offense, I think this year have definitely been, or not the questions, but the comments about their offense, it being new, less pick and roll heavy with Lowry per se, and as you alluded to, making everybody better. Of the supporting cast, who has, I guess, impressed you the most, and you think has the most capability of sustainability, especially when it comes to the playoffs?
Well, Serge Ibaka has been a huge addition for them. He had a bit of a slow start. He played really well last year when he came over from Orlando, but Lowry was injured for a lot of that time, so they didn't get a ton of time to play together. So one of the questions was how they would mesh, and both were really slow to start this season, but both have turned it on lately. And Ibaka has been really, really good. He's looked a little more spry, running the floor, blocking more. He's got starting to get those chase down blocks that he used to get in OKC a little bit more often, and his jumper comes and goes, but he's a nice little weapon and a good third wheel for DeRozan and Lowry, and they really needed that. And then obviously OG Anunoby, the rookie, no one, he was supposed to just be coming back right about now after blowing out his knee last year at Indiana. So that's why he slipped in the draft, because people thought he'd come back maybe at the earliest early December, but it could be as late as right about now in January. So people were scared and they weren't sure how he'd recover, but he's far exceeded expectations. It was a huge surprise when he was ready to come back for the preseason, and he took over the starting role pretty earlier in the season and hasn't really looked back. Like, this small forward has been a hole in Raptorland for like over a decade now. I mean, they lost Carter and McGrady, and they tried to fill it with a bunch of other guys, and just the list was brutal. And they never really, I mean, Rudy Gay for a bit filled it, but he didn't mesh with Lowry and DeRozan. So they've been searching for so long for the answer. DeMar Carroll didn't work out, but now Anunoby, the rookie, is playing defense like very few rookies do, and he's also shooting close to 40% or wherever it is on 3-pointers. So he's been a big help. And then off the bench, like, there've just been a bunch of guys that have been really good, including the point guards DeLon Wright and Fred VanVleet, who were very good college point guards, and they're starting to transition to the NBA now as well.
Ryan Wolstat joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to check his Twitter handle at WolstatSun. Ryan, let's continue the conversation about the Toronto Raptors bench. And it's, over the course of the offseason and leading up to this season, a lot of emphasis has been about the dependency that this team has had on Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. I think there was a few articles that I had written where Masai Urigi's emphasis was on Dwayne Casey, establishing more of a culture that has less heavy dependent on those two all-stars and more around the bench and the contributions of the players that are on that roster. What is it that you're seeing about this team, this bench, that is suddenly catapulted? One of the things that we questioned about this Toronto Raptors team is, would they be deep enough because of the wear and tear that both of their all-star players are giving them? What is it about this bench that you're seeing more than anything that stands out to give such confidence about how they're contributing? I mean, to me, it was always about the players that they have defensively to hold teams off, because offensively there will be inconsistency. But to your point now, you're saying how consistent they are showing offensively, even from their contributors off the bench.
Yeah, I think, it starts with defense. They have a lot of long guys. Like DeLon Wright's like a 6'5" point guard. Pascal Siakam's got really good reach. Jakob Pertl's a big mobile center. Like they just have a lot of length and athleticism back there, and really good defensive instincts. Like even when Norm Powell's playing well, he adds to that as well. But Wright's kind of the catalyst. Him and Siakam just run the floor so well, and they're just so long. The Raptors right now are just feasting, and all season really they've been feasting off opponents' turnovers, and they're just forcing them like crazy and getting out and running. Like their pace is way up from where it's been in the past, and that's really been a key. And then offensively, they might not have enough shooters. That's maybe the one issue. But CJ Miles is back there with that group, and obviously he's a deadly 3-point shooter. And now all of a sudden, DeLon Wright's starting to hit some threes, and they like to play Lowry with that group a lot, which helps too. And they've just been really good. It all starts with defense basically, but also that athleticism and just youthful energy. They're just outrunning teams, outworking teams, and just forcing them into mistakes.
So I'm going to go kind of a kind of a juxtapose to what you just said, because we talk about athleticism, right? But then we have the big man in the middle with Jonas Valanciunas, who has been, I think a beating horse, if you will, for KC for some time. And a lot of fans, I think, especially watch the Raptors, who say, why can't we get more out of him? And then some people say, why doesn't he get enough minutes? Where do you think he's at right now at this stage of his career, and in terms of what his role is going to be on this roster moving forward? Because we've seen him put up some really great games, nice double doubles. He's not blocking a ton of shots, but at least he's a presence in there defensively. And then sometimes he just disappears. You'll have like 4.5 rebounds in like 11 minutes. Well, kind of what's the situation with Valanciunas on this Raptors team and his relationship with Casey?
I mean, basically, it's tough for him. Like a lot of traditional big centers like that, the NBA has changed so much. And 10 years ago, he'd be a great player, a very extremely useful player. No one would have any problems with him making $16-17 million a year, because he'd be playing 25, 30 minutes a night and being one of the better centers in the league, because he's a big guy that can hit his free throws, can hit his jumpers, can catch the ball, is a deterrent at the rim, even though he's not so athletic, just because of his sheer size. And he's a great rebounder and a great screen setter. But the thing is, those things aren't as in demand anymore if you can't move your feet quickly enough and switch all over the floor and do all those sorts of things. So it's forced sort of the Raptors and Casey to take him out most times late in games, and to the point now where he's kind of like a platoon guy. He's going to play about 20, 22 minutes a night, and that's the way it is. And you can get a lot of utility out of him in that time, especially against the bigger opponents. He can still dominate inside. He plays very well against traditional centers, and even against Milwaukee, a team that is pretty fast and athletic and long. The other night, he obviously had a huge third quarter. He almost outscored and out-rebounded Milwaukee by himself in that quarter. So there's like you said, there's signs. He shows it. And in the playoffs, when DeRozan and Lowry have faltered, he's a guy when the game changes and slows down a bit and goes more inside, he's really come through in the past. So he's still a useful guy. He's not going to be that 30 minutes a night or even a 25-minute a night guy, but he has his use for the Raptors, and he's still a viable guy. I'm not sure how the Ibaka-Valanciunas pairing works, but it has its moments, and they're starting to gel a little bit. And then if they don't like it, they can always move Ibaka over to center, or they can bring in Jakob Pertl and put him beside Ibaka. So they have a lot of options, and it's on Casey. The challenge is they actually have more depth than almost any other team in the league. So how do you find enough minutes for everyone, and how do you make all these pieces fit?
Sorry, CL. Do you think in any way, shape, or form, though, because you've heard Valanciunas' name specifically, mentioned in trade rumors, is that something that's still kind of on the table, if you will, or do you feel like, okay, as you just mentioned, he's now accepting of his role, understanding where the NBA is going, understand what Casey wants for him to do in the minutes he's out there, and they're just going to kind of just ride it out as is?
Yeah, they don't have much of a choice, because the market for guys like Valanciunas is just so thin. You did see Greg Monroe move in a deal, but Vucevic was on the block for a long time before he really played well before his injury. And there's a lot of those traditional guys. It's just there's not a huge market for them. Brook Lopez went in the summer, but that was in a bigger deal, obviously. They've looked around, they've tried to deal them in the past, and they haven't found the value. So I would think unless they find something that makes sense, they're just going to hold on to him, because they have a lot of cap issues. So ideally, they would move him if they could get an expiring. But those sort of deals are really hard to pull off in this day and age. Like, you just don't see those expiring deals going very often like they used to 5 years ago or whatever. So they recognize he still has value, and if there's no deal out there that makes any sense, and so far there hasn't been, then they'll just hang on to him and try to solve their cap issues another way in the summer.
Ryan Wolstadt joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast from the Toronto Sun. Ryan, I just want to quickly poke the bear a little bit with this question about Jonas Valanciunas. From your observation, and I'm not saying that I want you to speculate, but from your observation, do you feel like Jonas Valanciunas is happy? I'm not talking about from the perspective of getting minutes or any statistical analysis. I'm talking about as a player and how he affects other guys on the team. Does he feel like within his role, what he's contributed and what he's been through with this team over the last few seasons, that he's acceptable of understanding what he's being used for, how he's being utilized in this new system that he's playing under Dwayne Casey?
There's no question it's been tough on him over the years. It hasn't. I mean, this is a guy who was like the stud of Europe for years, MVP of almost every tournament he was in as a youth for Lithuania, just a dominant force. And then he comes to Toronto, and at first he was supposed to be a main guy, and then he's been phased out and benched and all that sort of thing over the years. And I think he's accepted it really, really well. And at one point he was going to opt out of his final year and try to find a team that would play him more and stuff, but then when the NBA changed, that didn't become an option really anymore. So he's here, and to his credit, he's a fantastic teammate. Everybody loves him. He's great in the locker room. He doesn't sulk even when he's mad about not playing. He might say he's frustrated. The frustration will come out a little bit, but he's never disruptive. He never he'll never sulk, and he's always going to support, whether it's Ibaka or Siakam or Pirtle or Lucas Nogueira, whoever's playing in front of him. He'll be the first guy standing up and supporting them. So I have to give him a lot of credit, because it can't be easy being the man for so long and then sort of seeing yourself phased out into just sort of just kind of a guy on the team. And I know for a fact it's been tough for him, and he hasn't been happy at times, but he knows how good the Raptors are, and they are very good. And the grass isn't always greener, and he might be the guy on a really bad team. And I don't think that's necessarily what he wants. He likes winning, and I think he's been a Raptor since day one, since they drafted him fifth overall in 2011. And I think he realizes the situation, and he's happy to just let it be for now.
So, do the Raptors have, in essence, almost an embarrassment of riches? Because I think Valanciunas, as we've just kind of discussed at length, has platooned a little bit over the years. And then we saw a guy like Norman Powell, who was instrumental, I think, in his rookie year. And then second year played pretty well too. And now is seeing his role kind of step back a little bit. And especially with a guy like OG coming in now and kind of capturing that small forward position. What's his kind of status on this roster as well too, and how does Casey envision utilizing him moving forward?
Well, basically, yeah, like you said, it's kind of like an embarrassment of riches right now. They have more good players than minutes to play them all. With Fred VanVleet emerging as an undrafted guy who belongs in the NBA and is a really solid player. I know Wichita State fans knew all along that he was really good and just a winner. Like, even at his size, he just does some kind of things that remind you a bit of Lowry. Like, he's probably never going to be as good as Lowry is, but he has that same will, and he knows how to succeed at barely 6 feet. So, and Dwayne Casey's a guy that loves playing 2 point guards at a time. He used to do it with Corey Joseph. So he plays Lowry and DeLon Wright together, or Lowry and Van Vliet together, or sometimes he plays all three of them, because at Wright's size and length, he can play a bit of small forward. So that's kind of phased Powell out a little bit. Like, Powell, he signed a new deal in the offseason, an extension, and I think he was pressing a little bit. He was trying to do too much. He's always been an aggressive guy, and maybe this new offense hasn't fit him. Like, he's a guy that's going to get it and attack instead of like moving it around, and they're really trying to move it around more. So things haven't really worked. He really struggled, but they have a lot of confidence in him. They're still very high on him, and they're going to give him a chance. But the problem is, as long as they're playing so well, it's unclear from night to night if there's going to be any minutes for him. So the main thing Casey said this week was he just has to, however many minutes he gets, he has to come in there and just go all out and play really well and play smart, because you never know what's going to happen. And again, they are still high on him. It's just right now it's a numbers game, and he's the guy that has to sit.
Ryan Wolstadt joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to check him out. Available on Twitter. Couple questions for you. Before we let you race out of here, Ryan, is one of the things that I've seen with this basketball team, and it's kind of frightening in a sense. I don't mean to throw out crazy theories here, but I have my little conspiracy theory thing, and it's one of the things I fret when I think about this Toronto Raptors team. their ascension and what they've been doing over the last few seasons, it really reminds me of what we've seen with the Los Angeles Clippers and the Golden State Warriors. And the reason why I say that is because after this crazy offseason with the Boston Celtics, this division really should be the Toronto Raptors. But the Boston Celtics have been slowly but surely coming on. And then last year, like a thief in the night, they steal the Toronto Raptors thunder going into the playoffs. And then in this offseason, they pull like the unimaginable trade here with Kyrie Irving. And all of a sudden, the conversations and the talk about the Boston Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers seems more apropos than the idea of teams like the Toronto Raptors being a viable competitor or contender against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Do you fear that that window now is shrunk even further? And the perception is that these guys did not live up to why they were formed, what the purpose was, the moves that were made over the last couple of seasons, in which it should be the Toronto Raptors versus the Cleveland Cavaliers almost every single season in the Eastern Conference Finals until something is supposed to happen, tragically to LeBron James.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could have said that if they would have moved on from Lowry, if Lowry would have found a new home last summer, or Ibaka, and if they would have just retooled, which they really considered doing. Like they had two ways to go, and they decided to keep going for it. I think it's too early to say whether it's been a success or a failure. They did make one conference final, which they'd never come close to doing in the past. They won a playoff series last year, and before the last 2 years, like as sad as it is, the Raptors franchise had never won a 7-game series. They beat the Knicks once in 5 games, and then lost obviously in that classic against Iverson and the Sixers when Vince missed the shot. But other than that, they'd never won a 7-game series until they beat uh, Indiana and then Miami and then lost to Cleveland, and they beat Milwaukee last year. So I think it's still a success. But it's fair to say they should be there in the conference finals every year. They were good enough to be there last year. I agree with that. And they're good enough to be there this year. I don't think Washington has the depth, and Milwaukee hasn't lived up to expectations. And I think Boston's overachieved. And then after that, they've given themselves a chance with 2 more years of Lowry and DeRozan that if LeBron does go to California or wherever, that they're going to be right there as good as anybody in the East, even as good as Boston's going to be when everyone's healthy. The Raptors should be right there. So it's kind of interesting. This is the best era in Raptors basketball history, and I think there's more. There's still more ahead.
So my final question is this, regarding, we've talked about pretty much everyone on the roster, and we obviously touched on Lowry and DeRozan, but let's go a little bit more in depth into DeRozan. Obviously, adding the 3-point shot to his game this year, I think it's obviously been a big conversation, in the basketball world, if you will, too, and just his overall maturity and his control of the game, and even on this roster. Do you see himself? And I'm gonna use this in a kind of a strange comparison, if you will. We know he's not the MVP, right? But
Yeah.
is he a top 5 MVP candidate, kind of in the same way Isaiah Thomas was last year for Boston? What is your feeling on that? Should he be getting more consideration for those types of votes and his overall notoriety on this roster, what he does?
Yeah, I think after the top dogs, he's right there in the mix. I mean, maybe 5 would be a little high for me, but I think he's definitely been one of the 10 best players so far. I think he, if you're picking the All Star team, I think he's been the 6th best guard in the NBA, and he deserves to start for the East. And if I was voting, I voted last year for the All NBA team, and if I was voting again this year, I would have him on the 3rd team with Kyrie Irving behind the other top 4 guards. I think he's been that good. I mean, so top 5 MVP is maybe a tiny stretch, but he's definitely in the next mix after that, and he's been phenomenal. This is one of the best seasons any Raptors ever produced. Like, it's right up there with. I mean, it's not quite Vince Carter level, but it's really close, and it's right up there with the best Lowry seasons and the best Chris Bosh seasons. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit because of maybe a lot those things we talked about earlier about the playoffs and all of that, and the inefficiencies in his game. And if he truly has added this 3-point shot, then he's one of the most unstoppable forces in the NBA for sure. And the Raptors are again, they're going to be really interesting if he keeps this up.
So you don't you say if he really truly has it. So you're not a believer just yet.
Well,
Not
I mean,
40
like
games in.
he's had a few flashes where he's never been shot quite this many threes, but has over the years. There have been times where he shot a bunch more and made a bunch more, and then he's just gone away from it completely. I don't think that's the case at this time. I think he's serious about it this time, and he's actually going to keep it up. But until he I don't know. I should probably stop doubting the guy after all the times he's proven me wrong. But like,
I mean,
I just want
throwing
to see a
shade.
little
You're not
more.
throwing
I
shade
want
at
to
all at him.
just
None whatsoever.
just show
It's
me a
not
little
that.
more. Like, it's incredible what he's done. But I mean, I just want to see it a little more before I'm going to say, okay, he's a 3-point marksman that's going to be attempting 5 threes a game. Like, I just need maybe another month of it, and then I'll be a true believer. But there's no question he's been phenomenal, and right now he should make the All NBA third team.
This is why we need to bring you a guy on. Sorry, CL, but I'm just saying, no homerism. You know what I mean? Covering the team, but it's giving us the honest answers, the honest goods, man, and we really appreciate that, Ryan. I said, it's very rare sometimes when we get some of the writers to come on, they're just so overly positive, and their team can do no wrong. You seem to be right in the middle there, so we appreciate your subjectivity.
No problem.
Well, I lend to the fact that he is a 90s hip hop aficionado. So because of that, the next time that you do jump on our show, though, Ryan, we're gonna need you to come up with the soundtrack for your Toronto Raptors. So you're gonna have to come. You're gonna have to come up with a
No
theme
Drake, though.
song.
No Drake.
Yeah. Well, he's a 90s hip hop aficionado. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not expecting any Drake affiliated named songs here. You know what I'm saying? We're talking like, some Mass Appeal, right? Like some Gang Stars, it's some, what I'm saying, some Mob Deep. Like, I'm expecting that kind of mentality. So be sure, and I'm sure people are gonna be wanting to check that out as well too. We gonna bring them the funk come 2018, man.
All right, I was actually listening to Mobb Deep and Gangstar earlier today, among others, on the Spotify. So yeah, right on brand.
He is the man and one of the premier writers for the Toronto Sun. Our man Ryan Wolstadt. Ryan, man, we so appreciate you hopping on board with us this week and helping us get some more insight on why the Toronto Raptors are among one of the more dangerous and elite teams in the NBA as we speak.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Breakdown.
Still aftermath, and ain't nothing after that.
Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. This is the aftermath, man. Great discussion with Ryan Wolstadt. And look, I mean, if people are not really paying attention to all of the players, that the heavy hitters, as I want to call them right now, in the NBA, you're doing yourself a disservice, because the Toronto Raptors look like a much better version of themselves than we've seen over the last couple of seasons. And I mean, there's a variety of ways that we can look at what's attributed to this, but this is exactly what we're talking about when we have this much talent in the Eastern Conference and we're not giving it the recognition it deserves because it's just totally saturated with the persona of LeBron James. But this is exactly what we're talking about with competitive balance and why the Eastern Conference is slowly on the come up of being a very, very competitive conference in comparison to the Western Conference.
Yeah, you're right. What's funny about Toronto to me is, like, last year, for a good majority of the season, they were just shredding the Eastern Conference for the most part. And they were, I think, number one in offensive rating. And then they just kind of fell off a cliff. And even as you alluded to a little bit in the interview with Ryan, how the Celtics were able to kind of gain ground on them and then eventually surpass them in the Atlantic and in the Eastern Conference altogether, right?
And notice he threw a little bit of shade there where he's saying, yeah, I think that the Celtics have overachieved.
Overachieved, yeah.
Right.
There's no doubt. And I don't think, as an analyst looking at that Celtics roster, that I don't think it's a wrong assessment. You know, I mean, Boston is a very optimistic.
I don't know if I completely agree with that, but I get where you're coming from, and I certainly get where Ryan is coming from. But the reason why I put that question out there, Shaw, was because this is exactly what happened with the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Clippers. You have established players who have made a name for themselves in Blake Griffin, in DeAndre Jordan, and then you have Chris Paul, and then all of a sudden the names of Steph Curry, the names of Klay Thompson. Then they draft Draymond Green. Then they make the play for Andre Iguodala. Like, all of a sudden, and it was just a surge. It wasn't something where it was just like they slowly were creeping. No, they completely surged past the Los Angeles Clippers. And then all of a sudden, we stopped acknowledging and recognizing in certain spurts, we acknowledged that the Clippers should be or would be contenders and should be playing in a Western Conference final. And that's the thing that I'm kind of wondering. When we look at this in totality, and whatever this window is, will we be doing the same thing with the Toronto Raptors? Because it wasn't too long ago that we were applauding Masai Ujiri having these guys and forming this duo and then getting Serge Ibaka. And now we're talking about maybe the Boston Celtics could actually be in the Eastern Conference Finals every single year because of the move that they made to get Kyrie Irving. How crazy is that, man?
Well, it's funny you mention it from that perspective because I think when you mention the Raptors, as kind of like almost in a Clipper analogy, I thought, and Clippers Warriors analogy, I see that point, but also see it from not the Celtics being the Warriors, but more or less the Cavaliers being the Warriors. In essence, where the mentality of the Raptors is that they can't beat them, just like how the Clippers feel like they can't beat the Warriors. Like, yeah, we're good, but when we go against those guys, we get it handed to us. And I think that's where the Raptors were definitely at last year. So it's interesting how we have two different kind of takes on that same analogy, if you will, in terms of the Raptors' mind state and even in the roster construction. But again, this is a team now that is this year third in offensive rating and sixth in defensive rating. So that offensive rating is right back up to where it was at the midpoint again last year as well too. And you do wonder, even as Ryan alluded to, does that continue with the new offense and the continued buy-in that Lowry and DeRozan had? Does DeRozan continue to shoot threes at the clip that he's doing it? And the ball is being shared from all different spots on the floor, not just out of straight pick and roll and drive and kicks from Kyle Lowry. For me, this is what is really going to make the difference for this Raptors team. And of course, if those guys can be consistent once the playoffs come. But one thing has definitely happened for sure. And I got to say, I was a little bit skeptical, especially because these are not no-name guys when you think about it. But Lowry and Casey both said at the beginning of the season, our bench is going to have to produce. They're going to have to be better. We have to be able to coach them up, play them up, so that when the playoffs come, that they're going to be ready. And guys like OG Anunoby, you have DeLon Wright, you have Lucas Nogueira, who's out there playing some minutes, Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet. They've all been very great contributors to this roster, in addition to the veteran presence of CJ Miles. So for me, what they've established and what they wanted to do seems to be working, and hopefully it pays off for them come April and May.
Toronto Raptors looking for the right mixture, the right components to put this thing together. Kyle Lowry averaging fewer minutes this year, shot attempts, points, and yet he's posting the second highest true shooting percentage of his career. DeMar DeRozan is averaging the second fewest minutes of his career, and he is perennially one of the people that we talk about as that tier B, so to speak, as MVP candidates in the NBA. And with good reason, it's these elements that I think is helping the Toronto Raptors sustain and project themselves in the kind of light that we now currently see them in the NBA. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we have a great interview on tap in our segment of The Drop. Hey, there's a new phenomenon happening on the NBA digital side, and you don't want to miss this interview here on the Baseline NBA podcast.
Yo, just relax. Take it easy. Slow down. I had this friend of mine. Just, he was moving too fast, you know what I'm saying? I told him slow down. He said the sun don't chill. I said still, you gotta just appreciate life, just sit back, don't let it fly right past you.
Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week on The Drop, I'm just really excited. I know my man Shaw is really excited. We have two really phenomenal guys that are putting in work out, and we're not just talking about what we're talking, we're saying NBA on the court, and it's just always about the NBA players. It's not always about the James Hardens, the LeBron Jameses. Sometimes it's the man behind the men that's making things happen, and these guys are certainly making things happen for the NBA from a digital platform perspective, and also to the NBA community that far reaches out to young kids, young men who are striving to be better basketball players and eventually may even find themselves donning a jersey, being an NBA player, possible all-star. So with us this week, with this really interesting concept and platform that has just been rolled out, it's called eCoach. We have the executive director of the NBA Coaches Association, David Fogel, with us. David, how you doing today, sir?
Everything's great. Thank you guys for having me. Really excited about this opportunity and excited to promote our eCoach basketball project.
Okay, and also along with us, the Director of Business Operations at eCoach, Collier Mills. Collier, thank you so much for hopping on board with us.
No problem, guys. We really appreciate it. And like David said, we're excited to tell you a little bit about eCoach basketball and this deal with the NBA Coach Association and all the good stuff we've got going on.
Definitely. I'm not even gonna, waste any time trying to, jazz up the conceptualization of this. I think you guys are gonna best give us and our listeners an idea of how this matchup took place, how you guys got together and formed what I think is going to be a premier platform in people's insight and understanding of the coaching concept, the ability to the tools that are now available, and using the digital platform to give us a more consistent and definitely a fun way of us being able to understand and play the game at a better rate than we are today. So I'm gonna start with you, David. What brought you in on this idea to work with Collier and everybody there at eCoach and saying we want to develop a platform that allows our players, our kids, to really understand the concepts and understand the game of basketball in this kind of fashion?
Absolutely. So, I mean, Collier has been fantastic, and Rich Hempel and Ken Jackson, also of eCoach, who have just been fantastic with this partnership. From the Coaches Association side, this project has been in the works for close to 3 years now. The project was originally conceived by Coach Jim O'Brien, who's now the assistant coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, and just an amazingly smart and fantastic individual in and of himself. And the late, great Michael Goldberg, who was the executive director of the NBA Coaches Association from 1980 until his unfortunate passing about an earlier this year in 2017. Uh, Remarkable 37 years as executive director. Michael was my boss, my mentor, my colleague, and in many ways like a second father. And he was a tremendous person who was kind of a true visionary of the project. And it's really simple. Our NBA coaches wanted to set out and create the most comprehensive digital short form library of tips and drills that had ever been assembled. And that's exactly what we're doing through eCoach basketball. Our coaches now have a rare opportunity to teach our beautiful game the right way to fans, to players, to coaches all across the globe, and at the click of a button on an iPhone, a tablet, a computer, you name it. And it's something we're tremendously proud of, that we've been able to build it, kind of from the ground up. And all of our coaches have just been fantastic and are excited and jazzed up about the initial rollout.
So, Collier, let me ask you. I think because in our earlier conversations, it was said that you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were with some of the coaches that had created some of the content that was on there. Can you give us some of the names, the great names in NBA coaching that are part of this great platform?
Sure. Yeah, as David said, we've shot hundreds of short form videos with these coaches over the past couple of years, and coaches like Rick Carlisle of the Mavericks, Luke Walton of the Lakers, Jim O'Brien, as he said, assistant with the Sixers, Brett Brown, the head coach of the Sixers, Dwayne Casey, Alvin Gentry, Mike Budenholzer, Brett Stevens, Stan Van Gundy, Steve Clifford. We could keep going down. That's just a few of them, but we've been very fortunate to work with these coaches. And it's the great thing about the project is each coach brings their unique perspective and the unique way that they teach the game. And working with them, for the past year or so, we really get to know them a little bit and how they like to teach. And they all come to us with their own ideas of what they want to teach. Some of them are teaching advanced stuff that their guys are using in practice, and then some of them are teaching stuff that's very basic and fundamental. So we have a wide variety of topics we've captured and that we're releasing, and we've even got a couple coaches, I won't spoil too much of it, that do some stuff with their own sons that we're putting out there that's really cool for guys, kind of kids that are in the beginner stages and starting to really develop their game.
David Fogel and Collier Mills joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast, and introducing or rolling out the eCoach platform, eCoach basketball, with some premier head coaches of the NBA teaching the game in short video form, available on Google Play and also on the iOS iPhone app. And here's the thing, and I actually want to go back to you on this one, Collier. The NBA has been at the forefront, I think, without as much notoriety as I think is should be deserved, in its digital innovations, in the way that they go about using digital means to help promote the game, promote the sport, promote the brand. Why was it important at this particular juncture? You know, it's a 3-year project, obviously, but why was it important at this particular juncture to get it out now at where we see the NBA and in all of its glory and in all of the hype that we are now seeing this platform being pushed the way it is?
Well, I mean, I think you all understand the game is not, it's no longer just a popular sport in the United States. It truly is a global game. And our vision, along with David and the Coach Association, is to give everyone an access, give them availability of the coaches right in the palm of their hand. I mean, our vision at eCoach has always been, you know, typically in the past to be able to get to good coaching, you had to have some resources, some money, some depending on where you live, geography, and we wanted to eliminate that to make it available for everybody. Our platform it's a free download out of the App Store, and then you can upgrade premium to get premium content for just $7 a month, which we feel is very reasonable, rather than spending $30-40 an hour for a lesson. So, and it truly is a digital platform. It's right in the palm of your hand on your iPhone. You open up the app, you can search the word crossover, and Drills by Brett Brown will pop up, and Stan Van Gundy on the crossover. And that's something we're really excited about. And like I said, David and the Coach Association have been great with helping the coaches, giving us access to them throughout the year, and really growing this library. It starts, when you download the app, you get over 125 videos right away. And then the cool thing about it is going to continuously grow. We're dropping new videos in the app every single week.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I mean, our coaches at the Coaches Association, right? All NBA head and assistant coaches are some of the best basketball minds that we have on the planet. The Tiffany of basketball coaching, and not only are they talented, but they've also been given such an incredible platform by the NBA, by NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, who is just an extremely intelligent, genuine, and tremendous business person in and of himself. And you hit it right on the head, right? The NBA is growing in leaps and bounds, not only domestically, but we've seen a tremendous growth internationally into places like China, Brazil, the Philippines, Australia. And, I think as the game grows, right, we want to help, I like to use this word, democratize coaching, right? We want to be able to bring the best in the world to everyone, whether you're a fan, a player, a kid, or a coach trying to coach your son or daughter. And kind of through this platform and through the NBA's tremendous growth, I think we've been able to string something together that could be pretty powerful.
And I think that's a great point. I'm one of those people. I'm kind of nerdy in that way. Obviously, most journalists or media types, they want to talk to players. I love talking to coaches. I just love to hear their insight. They just see the game from a different perspective than most people do, and I think they just provide so much insight. So, David, I want to ask you, and I know Collier had alluded to it, but have you, in trying to, maybe that's the wrong word, but trying to assess and get coaches to be on this platform, has there been any pushback? Have coaches like, nah, I'm too busy, I don't have time? When are the videos being recorded? How are you getting eCoach, the great coaches that the NBA has to offer?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, for me, I'm probably gonna be a little biased. I talk to coaches, each and every day. We're emailing, we're talking on the phone. These guys and girls are amazing. They're some of the most passionate, caring, and genuine people I've ever interacted with. I would say we've had zero pushback from our coaches. We meet once in September. We have a big gathering of all of our head coaches, and then in Las Vegas during Summer League with a lot of the assistant coaches, and everyone has been jazzed up about the project. We've tried to make it as efficient and less time consuming as possible. We do most of our video shoots out in Las Vegas during the Summer League, and then throughout the season and the off season, we'll have the eCoach crew fly out to some of their hometown arenas or practice facilities and be able to squeeze it in between their workouts.
David, I want to follow up on something with reference to the emphasis in it being the NBA premier coaches that is pushing or moving this forward, because I often at times look at the state of the NBA, the climate, the heightened sensitivity, and the expectations of performance, especially the demand that is made on coaches like the Rick Carlisles and the Brett Browns of the NBA, the Stan Van Gundys, and what they've achieved, what they've implemented, what they've given us over the years, I think is phenomenal. And when I see the window of opportunity for NBA coaches kind of shortening because of the demand, what's happening in their area, the organizational ladder, and everything like that, to have them come out here and provide this kind of brand, this kind of product, it almost kind of hits the reset button for us on the way that we should be looking at the game and interpreting it and appreciating the way that it moves and flows. What's the biggest thing that you've taken away as being part of this initiative and the insight that you are getting from these coaches and the ability to see how they're translating that to this platform? Because I often think at times it's difficult for them to balance this aspect of it because they still have to be a head coach of a professional basketball organization, and yet here's a platform that I think is heightening the elevation and the importance of why there are head coaches in the NBA as we speak today.
Absolutely. I mean, well, I forget who said it first, but an NBA head coach doesn't grow on trees. I mean, these guys and girls are phenomenal at what they do. They're tasked with a tremendously, tough operation, running an organization, traveling all over, the country and the world. Very, demanding hours, and yet they still find time to, kind of give back and come out with this great platform. One of my favorite pieces of what we've been doing is an aspect that's called Meet the Coach, where you get this opportunity to meet a Stan Van Gundy, meet a Rick Carlisle, kind of through the app, and learn a little bit about their coaching tree, learn about their bios, who they've coached, where they've come from, their hometown, and who they've been able to coach along the way, some of their favorite players. At the end of the day, that's one of the more rewarding pieces of this project, because our coaches are fathers and mothers and husbands, wives, and it's great to get to know them off of the court and sort of humanize them in a way that does not just involve X's and O's and wins and losses. But the real, sort of conception of this project really came from Coach Jimmy O'Brien. He had gone and done some clinics overseas in China, and along with a number of our other coaches over the years. And they always came back saying, there's no lasting digital infrastructure of teaching out there. They might bring a few tips and drills or plays that they used to hand out on note paper and then email, PDF and Excel sheets, you name it. But that's it. And so a lot of these clinics and camps overseas were constantly asking for more information because they want to get better. They want to become better coaches. And even here in the US, right? Stan Van Gundy, one of the most amazing things he said to us was he wants to continue to learn each and every day. Stan is one of the top coaches in the game, and he still wants to learn and become a better coach, every day. So that's just been really phenomenal to watch and sort of evolve through the project.
So Collier, David touched on it a little bit as well a little while ago, but I want to ask you directly. So being that you're kind of been very hands-on with the coaches themselves as they do it, that kind of the humanization factor of the coaches, I think, is something that people would love to get. Do you see that as something that's more of a premium content type of thing? So that's something that people are going to have to pay for per se, or is that something as well too? Because again, X's and O's, that's great, and I understand that that's what people are going to want to learn. They want to know those fundamentals. But would we be getting a lecture on just on how to control your locker room from Stan Van Gundy or something like that? What type of premium content is available that makes it worthwhile?
Yeah, sure. Well, when you download the app, like I said, you get some freebies in there right away. And one of the freebies, like David said, is the Meet the Coach video. We have 19 videos in there right now, and it like David said, it's some really cool stuff. Just hearing the coaches tell their story and coming directly from them on a video, and it's very neat to hear. A lot of them they were just video guys and have worked their way up, and then you hear stories about who they've played with and who they've coached along the years, and some interesting stuff coming straight from the mouths of the coaches, and so that's kind of what you get from the free standpoint. Like I said, you can upgrade just for $6.99 a month, and then you get hundreds of tips and drills, and they can be anything from individual improvement stuff. Coach Brett Brown did some awesome ball handling stuff that's really some unique perspective that he brings, and then we do some stuff for coaches that are just plays. Terry Stotts, the Portland Trailblazers coach, did the thumb set that he runs with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, which is some awesome plays. And but it's just, like I said, it's not just for pro guys, it's for young kids. Steve Clifford with the Hornets, we did a series on some plays they run with some elementary, middle school kids. And that's the beauty of this project, is it's for everyone. I mean, and I hate to say that, I sound like a marketer, but it's for guys and girls that are just starting out in the game and just want to learn. But it's also for players that are playing in high school, college, professional, that want to learn some new stuff. Coach Kenny Atkinson of the Nets did some, and I'm a basketball junkie, and so this stuff is extremely fun for me. But I'm learning as I go also. And what I was getting to with Coach Atkinson is he did a whole series on finishes and with some stuff that's just people don't know about, and it's unique perspective that he has because he played for a long time overseas, and he just brings a new perspective to the game of basketball and how to improve how you finish around the basketball using both hands and some different kind of floaters and whatnot. So it is some really behind the curtain kind of stuff that people don't have access to, and I think that's what the coaches are so excited about sharing is they don't want to just hog all the information they have just in the NBA. They really care about growing the game and growing the game in the right way.
Executive Director of the NBA's Coach Association, David Fogel, and the Director of Business Operations of eCoach, Collier Mills, joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Couple more questions, guys, with reference to the eCoach platform. And actually, I'm gonna throw this one at you, Collier. Where do you see this? Where do you see this going? You've mentioned a lot of really insightful angles, and that even I myself could be envisioning on how bigger this thing can actually be, and especially when you're implementing the aspect of the globalization part of the game and the way that the game has influenced other countries, the teaching acumen, the insight, the tips involved. I mean, is your entity prepared for this? Because it can spread literally like wildfire. It's one thing if we're talking about a sport that doesn't really have any legs to grow on. We've seen how quickly the NBA can grow like wildfire. I mean, you realize what you're probably starting right now? You could be literally starting a digital movement that's captivating people's way of appreciating the game that's only been held by so many people who have been, to your point, NBA junkies.
Yeah, well, I think we're ready and we're excited about it. And I come from a little bit unique perspective. I was fortunate. My dad played at the University of Kentucky and he coached me from a very, very young age. And so I had the opportunity to learn from somebody that really understood the game. And I don't take that for granted. I was very fortunate, but at eCoach, we understand, and that's kind of our mission is we want to make the best coaching in the world available to everyone. And doesn't matter, like I said, doesn't matter where you live or how much money you have. We just want to give everybody access to the best coaches, and that's what we're doing with this eCoach basketball platform. And I have a quick story. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she had a game yesterday, and she was struggling getting her shot off a little bit. So literally an hour ago, we were at the gym, and we pulled up the eCoach basketball app and watched Coach Brown's drills on creating separation with the dribble, and that's what gets me excited. And I think that's what David and the Coach Association are so excited about is just taking the game of basketball and breaking it down and giving everyone access to the 30 best minds in the game.
Did she have? Did he have Ben Simmons doing the drills with him? I'm just saying because as much as I love Ben Simmons, man, got to get that shot right for the Sixers, man, if they're going to make this playoff run. I'm just saying,
No, so Coach Brown's drills were with some younger kids, which which my daughter can definitely relate to, but no, Ben Simmons was not in the video. We don't use current players, but we do. We've got some great videos with Elton Brand, 2-time NBA All-Star, on how to control the middle of the paint, and which is some cool stuff too that really helps players learn to run the floor, run in front of the rim, seal, duck in, and get some easy buckets.
Well, that brings me to a great question, I think, in this, and I guess I'll ask for David first, and Collier, if you have any kind of backup information on it as well too. Those types of players who may be retired, who do see the game in a different way, are those guys could that be additional content that gets added to the platform at a later date too? And I think everyone is dying to know is Coach Pop already a part of this? Does he have a video out there that we can download and look at immediately?
So first, let me answer that sort of in two folds. First, absolutely, right? So we have the commitment of all of our head and assistant coaches. Every year there's about 190 active members in our coaches association. But we also have a database of close to 200 to 300 inactive or alumni coaches. And just in our first set of videos that we released, we've been able to shoot Bill Cartwright and Byron Scott, who both throw a very unique perspective on the game and come from their own very unique background. So we want to implement as many of the alumni coaches because they've been everywhere. And every coach that's kind of gone through the league and put on a suit and coached a game has their own unique perspective. So it's something we want to sort of push out. And we never know which coach is going to connect with, a fan, a player, or a middle school coach.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And then is Pop one of the 30? I mean, again, obviously he's one of the 30 NBA coaches, but does he have content specifically on this platform already?
Pop has been amazing throughout the entire project, and like all of our coaches. And we are hoping to get Pop. We sort of do these shoots in shifts, and so for the 2018 Vegas Summer League, he's definitely on our radar.
So I have one final question here and I guess this is to either one of you as well too. When you started this and how it's already launched, what has been the response? Just overall, are you excited about it? And will you guys have any other partners that are involved? Obviously, it's the NBA Coaches Association and eCoach as a platform kind of coming together. But are there any types of corporate sponsors that are going to be involved in this project as well too?
The response has been great. I mean, we just literally, we launched 5 days ago. So it's very early in the game, and we kind of wanted to, we put a press release out, but wanted kind of a soft launch to get the wheels turning and the ball rolling, so to speak. And but the response has already been overwhelming, and we're just really excited, as David said, to continue to add more and more coaches. And like I said earlier, you get when you download the app, you get over 125 already, and we're adding to it every single week. So we've got tons of stuff in the can that we're ready to push out there. And the opportunity is huge, and we don't take it lightly. Like I said, we're not looking for any other basketball coaches, players, if you will, because we've got the 30 best head coaches in the world. And then like David said, the assistants as well are on this project. And we've shot some stuff. We had Lloyd Pierce, one of the head assistants with the Sixers, did a great series on defense. And Dan Burke, who's been a long time assistant with the Pacers, we've got a series with him on defense. He's kind of a defensive specialist on team defense. And so we're not, from eCoach's side, we're not looking to add any other, folks in the basketball game other than these coaches, because we know we've got the best.
The platform is called eCoach. It's eCoach Basketball. The website, www.basketball.ecoach. A phenomenal platform that's being released. The premier head coaches of the NBA teaching you the game of basketball, available on Google Play platform, and also iOS, which means, if you got an iPhone, you're good to go. iPad, you're good to go. As to your point, Collier, you mentioned annually it's $70 a month, $6.99 for a monthly premium content. It's a must-have for those who really want to understand the nuances, the intricacies of the game, and just want to understand and be better players if you play the game of basketball. To our guests, David Fogel, Executive Director of the NBA Coaches Association, and Collier Mills, Director of Business Operations here at eCoach. We really want to thank you so much for jumping on board and giving us some wonderful input on really a platform that I think is going to have a lasting impression, not just to our listeners, but just to people abroad in understanding the game of basketball. This eCoach platform is just phenomenal, guys.
Thank you both so much for the time. I mean, this was a tremendous opportunity, and to everyone out there who's listening, never before has there been such close access to some of the greatest basketball minds on the planet. Get on the app, and we'd appreciate any of your feedback, Collier and myself.
Yeah, Warren, Cal, thank you all so much for having us on.
Definitely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast, discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. Now, Andrew Bogut, our man, the Bogut one. He has finally been released, relinquished, dashed away by the Los Angeles Lakers, albeit I'm not so sure why in the world the Los Angeles Lakers even bothered to sign this man. If you are Andrew Bogut, and I'm sure you're relieved of this situation, where could you possibly go where you, being a former NBA champion, your skill set can be most pliable for an NBA team?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some interest in him. Maybe not as much as there was a year or so ago when he signed with Cleveland and got hurt one game and he missed that. I look at a team like the Washington Wizards, potentially who may just want some depth behind Gortat. Maybe the Milwaukee Bucks too, although they obviously that's even where he started, but he's not. He doesn't fit their overall mold because he's not all that athletic anymore. But another veteran guy they could add to that locker room, and then maybe even the Houston Rockets. You know what I mean? Just depending on the health of Nene and guys like Tariq Black as well too. I think those are three teams that playoff teams that could definitely be looking and potentially be using.
All right, out in Houston, James Harden will miss at least 2 weeks due to a left hamstring strain. The Houston Rockets are still a very good basketball team, but how much of an impact will that be for Harden and his chances as far as maintaining the sizable lead I believe that he is established as the go-ahead MVP candidate so far?
Yeah, I mean, if he misses more than 2, it becomes 3 and 4. It becomes a little bit a bigger question in terms of his MVP candidacy. But the Rockets, they've missed him. Like let's no bones about it. Chris Paul, just although very good and all NBA level, it's not the same dynamic that the Rockets are used to with James Harden. So they need the beard to get back out there as soon as possible. But I think it's a great question to figure out how much time can he miss and maintain his MVP candidacy. I'd say he can't miss more than the essential 2 weeks or the initial 2 weeks that was prognosticated.
Yeah, in the immortal words of Jay-Z and Kanye West, according to the king, watch the throne. Out in Chicago, Nikola Mirotic. I mean, this dude has been burning it up, hot like fire, career best numbers all around. And you would think that he'd be happy to be in Chicago. He's like, nah, like, look, man, I'm helping y'all guys look really good, but I really want out. What were we talking about here with Nikola Mirotic, man?
I'm talking about a guy who's boosted his potential trade value. I mean, the Bulls have been very good since his return. You know, I think they won 9 of their first 11 games with him back. They've gone a little bit of a slide recently, coming back to earth a little bit, but nevertheless, he's been a great teammate being out there. He's hustling. I've seen Mirotic diving on the ground for the ball, shooting the basketball on confidence from 3 as well too. I think there will be a market if the Bulls do intend to move him, and why would they not? I mean, Markkanen is playing pretty well. They still have Bobby Portis there too, so if Mirotic can get them some sort of any type of value, whether that's a pick or even some more outside shooting, I think that's the move that the Bulls would have to make, and I'm sure obviously he'd be very happy to go as well.
All right, a couple of guaranteed deals, and both out of the NYC. Jarrett Jack for the New York Knicks and Spencer Dinwiddie for the Brooklyn Nets. Both have their contracts guaranteed for the remainder of the year. How significant or how important is that? Is it more for the team's benefit, or is it more for these players? I mean, guys that are like been considered journeymen. Jarrett Jack, man, is like a jack of all trades, I guess is the best way to put it with this dude. Him now solidified for the rest of the season, obviously must be a good thing for him.
Yeah, I think in the case of Jack, it's more for the team stability with the Knicks and letting Ntilikina kind of learn from that veteran in front of him. I don't doubt that Ntilikina will be starting at some point toward the end part of the season, but the Knicks are in playoff contention. You know, they're right there, and a lot of that has been the steady play of Jarrett Jack. Well, let me retract that. The play, I wouldn't say it's steady. The play and influence of Jarrett Jack. Because he definitely has some duds out there. But in the case of Dinwiddie, I think it's great for him. Coach has already said that there's a good possibility that he and D'Angelo Russell start next to each other when Russell comes back later in this month. So, kudos for Dinwiddie. I think it's more for personal accomplishment for him. And in the case of Jack, it's definitely something the team needed to do.
All right, finally, Shaw. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek freak, freaking the NBA All-Star All-Star balloting in its first successions of votes in. Currently, he is the vote getter at 863,416. LeBron James at 856. What is it about the Greek freak phenomenon, man? It isn't as if the Milwaukee Bucks have been wowing everybody, but has the Greek freak been wowing everybody right now so far in the NBA?
I'm stunned, to be honest with you. When it's not LeBron and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, those 3 names, if you will, leading your MVP candidacy.
Even a Kyrie Irving, if you want to make the argument, because he's now in a market by himself in a team on a team that he's shouldering essentially in many ways. But yeah, even he's not considered the top dog. It's Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I think it's great. Obviously, I have no problem with it. I mean, there's no chance that you don't ever vote for LeBron if you're looking at the ballot. But the fact that Giannis is right there, and if this were to continue, and I don't think it will, if it were to continue, he would actually get to pick the Eastern team. I think that's just hilarious. You know what I mean? That would be really something. And his initial quote saying that, of course, you'd pick LeBron number one, and hoping that, when LeBron would choose Milwaukee in free agency this upcoming summer too. So always the politics in the NBA, man. You always got to be watching everything that people are saying. But I think that's a smart move on Giannis' part if he were to get that honor, if you will, to be the captain of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, not everything is what it appears to be, man, especially in the NBA. What an awesome show, Shaw, man. Not much more can be said, man. We just, going through the gamut, man, in a way that we're starting off with 2018, man. The NBA is moving at an all-time pace, man, and we're trying to navigate the flow, baby. We're just trying to navigate the flow.
And I think we're doing a great job. Pats on our own back here, self high fives in the mural of Dallas Downs page, if you will, Diamond Dallas. But for us, the basketball world is something that we were intricately involved in, and all aspects of it. The culture of the game is something that we want to continue to bring to you guys as listeners and all of our fans out there. So, yes, we're going to talk NBA, or we're going to talk about culture a little bit, but whatever it is, it's going to be something that's worthwhile. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. And I think today's show definitely was proof positive of that, touching on so many different areas of the league and even outside of the league as well, too, man. So as always, couldn't do it without you, brother. And as always, I appreciate it, homie.
Definitely. So once again, we'd like to thank our man, Ryan Wallstatt, David Fogel, the Executive Director of NBA Coaches Association, and Collier Mills, Director of Business Operations at eCoach. Thank you so much for helping us give you such a great show. For The Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you next time.